Hey everyone, this time we read Breakout, Pilgrim in the Microworld by David Sudnow. This is a really fascinating book, mostly because David wrote this right before the video game crash in 1983, and he somehow has a lot of things to say about Breakout, and it's really cool to hear him go through the actual game. Breakout and Missile Command were the first two games that he played, and he kind of captures his thoughts and his opinions of those two games here in this book. So we start off with David telling us a little bit about trying to get his son out of an arcade. David was grading papers at the time, and he was finished up. He was finished with his coffee, decided to go get his son out of the arcade that was upstairs. He goes up there, and he just goes through this great description of somebody who had clearly never seen a video game before, because David hadn't seen video games before. And he tries to kind of understand what his son is doing, what the other games are about. He tries a few of the games and doesn't really understand exactly what's happening. And it's just a really cool thing, and it sort of causes David to kind of get the wheels turning about maybe I should kind of look into these different things. What really sparks off his decision, though, is when he goes to a dinner party and he plays Missile Command on the Atari 2600. He also plays a little bit of Breakout, but mostly they're playing Missile Command, mostly because it was one of the newer games at the time of probably him doing his research, and at the time of him kind of learning about video games. And he goes into those things, and it's just really, really cool how deep he goes into really Missile Command at first, but then really goes into Breakout once he gets a hold of that game. So after the dinner party, he decides he's going to buy an Atari 2600 and Missile Command, sort of so he can kind of experiment more with the game and learn a little bit more about it. David gives us a breakdown of Missile Command, really how it's different from the home version and the arcade port. And it's kind of fun to see him go over this, but other books have gone more in depth with it. What I also like here is that he talks about how some of the experiences he had with the dinner party were really interesting, where he experimented a little bit there with trying to figure out different ways to move the cursor about the screen and take out as many missiles as possible. He really seemed to have wanted to do more on Missile Command, but for different limitations he could. While he's at the store, he gets the Atari, but unfortunately they don't have a copy of Missile Command there. So the clerk recommends that he try Breakout. He played it at the dinner party, so he sort of was familiar with it, he mentions, but not quite as familiar with Missile Command because, well, he played that in the arcade and he had seen his son play it as well. He gets Breakout, he takes all of his stuff home. As he's bringing it into his house, his neighbor kind of sees him, and his neighbor's kind of younger, and the two of them sit down and start playing Breakout together. While the two of them are playing, David goes over some of the similarities between Breakout and Missile Command. They don't have a whole lot in common aside from being made by Atari, and that's really about it. Missile Command is more of an allegory towards the Cold War and, nuclear destruction, whereas Breakout was really just a Pong clone or a version of Pong that you could play by yourself. And really, that's kind of where things end. They're both really fun games. Personally, I like Missile Command more. Now, I almost wish the entire book was like this, where David goes and he meets the programmer and he interviews them, and he gets a little bit more information about, the game and how it's put together and how to play it. That was really the most fascinating part for me, especially since, I guess back in the 80s, you could just do this. I'm assuming he probably called up, set up meetings with these guys, but it seems like he just showed up. At least that was my impression of reading the book. I know it probably didn't go that way, but that was just the way I kind of read it. What happens next is David gives us several really in-depth explanations of how Breakout was programmed and how it's kind of played. And he does this in a really cool way. I really like the way he does it. where he sort of explains, how the paddle is set up and just some of the different angles that you can make when you're hitting the ball off of the paddle. What David explains is that the Breakout Paddle is divided into 5 separate parts. As you can see, with the blue, red, sort of the yellow, different color of blue, and the pink there. Now, each of these parts acts independently, where if a different part is hit by the ball, it'll send off at a different angle. This is kind of cool and adds to some of the strategy of the game. It's sort of a fun thing that David finds out, and it's really interesting, and it adds a lot to the way the game is actually played. Personally, I usually just ran around and hit the ball with the paddle. I never really paid too much attention to this. But it is fun to notice, and it is nice that David was able to find this out. From here, David starts practicing, and he practices at least what seems like a lot, but I don't think it really was. But it's really him just trying to get into really how the game is played and doing some experiments to see just how good he can actually get or achieve the goal that he's trying to achieve. David basically started doing a bunch of experiments. He learned a bunch of the technical things about the game from, going to Atari and speaking with the programmers, or at least the ones that were still with the company, so that he could learn as much as possible about the way the game is supposed to be played, at least the way, the programmers had designed it. One interesting thing he finds out is that just because the programmers designed the game one way, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know exactly how to play it. I really do like that he seemed to take the time to really learn this sort of thing, because we start off in the arcade where he's watching his son play it and he really has no idea what's going on, and then he sees some of his friends play it at a dinner party. And then near the end of the book, he's kind of figured out how to play these games, and he can see some value in them, but he doesn't really understand how they're fitting in. It's sort of like his own personal quest to figure out why these things are fun. I still get the sense that he's not really sure about video games still. He does mention this a little bit at the end of the book, where he's not really sure what role they fit, whether they're educational, entertainment, or something else. And it's sort of a cool thing to read him sort of mull these things over on paper in front of you. It's sort of a fun little thing that he throws in here that I really did enjoy. Near the end of all this, he mentions that he was having more fun playing Breakout when he was just making geometric shapes with the ball and the paddle and not even bothering with the last few bricks on the screen. And it sort of plays into that you make your own fun out of these video games. You can play the main game regardless of whether it's an arcade or if it's, a more lengthy RPG, but you can tell your own story in your head as you're playing these games. And especially for Atari, you had to use your imagination a lot of the time, because some of the games really didn't do a whole lot for you. You kind of had to make some stuff up as it went along. So I really did like this book. I liked how David didn't overreact to seeing his son playing video games, and he didn't really fall into that weird moral panic mindset that you see some adults fall into when they see kids playing video games, or they see what kind of video games they're playing. Some of the moments in the book where he's sort of trying to figure out the video game, figure out how to play it, and kind of rationalize what's happening in his own head. It made me think back to playing video games with my dad, where he's making all the sound effects and everything along with the game, and you're just you just have this moment of embarrassment, even though you're the only two people playing, and he's obviously having fun. I think he was having fun. But it's just one of the things I thought of while I was reading this. Anyway, guys, this was a really good read. I really did enjoy the book. Definitely pick this one up if you can. It's part of Boss Fight Books' book collection, and it's a really, really great read. I'll talk to you guys later. If you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below, and have a great day.